As early as 1928, the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric. By constantly probing and straining at this one spot, they calculated that eventually the cloth could be torn apart and that Americans could be divided, weakened, and perhaps even set against each other in open combat. We mustn't kid ourselves into thinking that the communists have placed their agitators only into the black communities. They're working both sides of the street. They want hatred, violence, and bloodshed between the races, and they don't care how they get it or whom they use, even children if necessary. Here is a book that I think ought to be in every home library. It's entitled Color, Communism, and Common Sense by Manning Johnson. He joined the party as a young man because he honestly believed that the communists were trying to improve the conditions of his people. He was a dedicated communist, and eventually he rose to one of the highest ranks. But after many years, he discovered that instead they were merely planning to use his people in a bloody revolution to destroy America. And when he woke up to this, he dropped out of the party and devoted the rest of his life trying to alert his fellow citizens of all races to the true nature of the Communist Party as he knew it to be from the inside.
I mean, everything that I had said in those old presentations is still true, except you might say it's on steroids today. Every time I would discover something like the communist strategy for revolution, not just being a violent revolution, but how they use, in civilized societies, they use the parliament. They use violence to frighten people into accepting laws that bring communism to being through legal processes. And the whole purpose of the violence was not to destroy the government by violence, but simply to scare the people and the politicians into voting themselves into communism. I thought, well, I never heard that before. And here I am reading these communist manuals and listening to their speeches and reading their books. And that there's a playbook. And the playbook was written by Karl Marx and Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, and then some of the followers that came along afterwards and tweaked it a little bit. And they if you read their stuff, you get this very clearly. But of course, people don't read their stuff. Now you look at what's happening on the streets, and it's Marxism, Leninism. And in one country, they'll pit Catholics against Jews, or Christians against Muslims, or they'll pit the rich against the poor, and they talk about this. For a country that they want to take over, they carefully examine its social structure, its economic structure, and find out what are the weaknesses in it. What are the potential areas that if you kept hammering away at the cracks, could you split it? Could you get the people fighting each other, hating each other over something? Following the age-old rule of, divide and conquer. So the first thing they have to decide is, well, how are we going to divide people? On what grounds? And so now we get to these pamphlets that we're talking about. They determined long ago that division in the United States would be race. They said that's the weak point in America. So let's forget all these other things. We use those in other countries. But in America, we're going to get whites and blacks killing each other. Now, once that happens, we can take over because they're so busy fighting each other and hating each other that they won't notice that we, by the way, have taken over. And then, of course, we put an end to it because we clamp it down with an iron fist. And we just use and they call them the useful idiots. They really refer to the people that go out and really get all riled up over the ideology of class warfare or religious warfare or race warfare. They call them useful idiots. And they know that when the time comes after the old system is destroyed, there'll be a consolidation period where they have to establish their own power now and make it as rigid, or if not more so, as the old one. And at that point, they know that a lot of the people that helped them come to power, when they see how it's really working out, they're going to be their enemies. Because a lot of them are idealists. And when they find out it's not turning out the way they were told, it's turning out to be worse than the old order even, well, then they'll turn against the communists. And so they know that that's going to happen. And so then when they get to that consolidation period, well, they'll just take all these former useful idiots, as they call them, and they'll kill them. And they have to do that because they know otherwise they'll have to fight with them later on. Now, how do I know that? It's because they write about it. It's in their training manuals. And I've interviewed defectors, people from the KGB, for example, that talk about it. And they refer to the documents and they refer to the historical evidence of it. It always happens. Every time communists come to power in a country, they go through these certain steps. They have to get rid of the police, for one thing. And we call it defunding the police. But in all other countries, they just say, get rid of the police. The police are part of the old capitalist imperialist powers, and we must get rid of them. They're cruel, they're unjust, they're terrible. They're instruments of tyranny. And of course, they kill all the policemen and all their families and everything. And in the process, then they replace them with all the criminals that have been released from the prisons, the worst dredges of society they can find. And it's the criminals that get through and shoot and kill all of the enemies of what they know will be enemies after they come to power. And so after the criminals and the maniacs do all that killing, and they think they're going to be in charge now, but then when they're done with their job, then they get killed. So, this is the way it works. And when I discovered that, I thought, wow, how come they don't teach this in school? And then I found out it's because the teachers in school were the ones that were following the strategies. And that was a blow, let me tell you.